Hello. I am just about to turn into New England, the New England, North Dakota, which is a town, not the part of the United States. So I wanted to start out. I'm going to get into the science of handwriting, but I just thought I'd do a quick little side blurb about New England first. It's a small town, about 500, maybe 600 people. At one time, there was a Catholic school in New England. In fact, you'll see it on your right. It is now a women's jail that is attached to the Catholic Church in New England. And I bring that up because there's a book out now about that school, St. Mary's School. Only they rename it. They renamed the town New London and so on. But it's basically about this. It's about a priest who ran the school back in the late 60s, early 70s, and all the devious back dealings that he would have had. I haven't read the book, so I can't evaluate it for myself. I know that it has been controversial around here. Some people saying, yep, that didn't go far enough. Other people saying, no, it's all wrong. I know people who personally were affected by this priest. Either they went to the school or whatever. But yeah, that brick building to your right there is the Catholic school that is now a women's jail. A lot of the small towns in North Dakota used to have a Catholic school, and very, very, very few of them survive. Mostly you'll find your Catholic schools in the cities. I think there's a Catholic elementary school still surviving in Rugby, North Dakota. That's all I can think of. I'm sure there's others, I just don't know them. But anyway, not a comment on Catholic education at all, just, an interesting little piece of culture from New England, North Dakota. Other than that, New England suffers a bit because it's close to Dickinson. In fact, there are a lot of people that live in New England and drive to Dickinson every day because it's cheaper to live in New England. But even with that, it has a much more thriving main street than a lot of towns that distance from a city would have. So good for them. That means people are still shopping local, and I like to see that. I like to see small communities survive. So this is Main Street, New England. I'm driving slowly like I always do. And we'll end up at the school, the public school, and then turn and get onto Highway 22. I just thought it'd be interesting to take this little side jaunt. So my real topic for today's video is actually about handwritten versus typed notes. So part of what's gotten me interested in this is the school where I teach. It's a high school, well, it's a K through 12 school, but I teach in the high school part. Is going to be 1-to-1 next year, which means each student is going to have a device. In the high school, it will be a Microsoft Surface. For the junior high and elementary, it's something called a Beck, which is a much more rugged, much less expensive thing like a Microsoft Surface. The very youngest kids, I want to say kindergarten and first grade, will be... Not every student will have a device. They'll be sharing them between classrooms. So however that works out. I actually have experience with it as a student. In 1994, I graduated high school. My high school had a nice computer lab full of Apple IIe's. Yes, even in 1994. Went to college and was the first class at Grove City College to be 1-to-1. I have a link here that just popped up. It's actually left from, I recycled the template, and it just happened to recycle that one at the right place. But anyway, we were an early adopter in 1994, and so I got to see it. Now, I didn't like to take my computer with me. If I knew we needed it for class, I'd take it with me, but it's just not something I'd grown up with. My family had a TI-99 4A, sorry, got the name wrong there. And like I said, the school had an Apple IIe, so that, it wasn't part of my personal culture. This, of course, was pre-wireless internet. If you were going to internet, it was very primitive then, often with a modem, and there wasn't too much wireless, really. Eventually, by the time I left there, internet was starting to come into the dorm rooms, but it was all hardwired. I'm sure now it's wireless everywhere. So if you wanted to use the internet, you had to go to the school computer lab. And there were Macintosh computers at one end and Windows computers at the other. Windows were running Windows 3.1. Macintosh were whatever it was before OS X came out. And then in the middle, we had a bunch of VAX terminals because we had a DEC VAX computer that was very old technology. So, yeah, internet wasn't a big thing with me. But a lot of my classmates would take the laptop with them. They'd take notes on their laptops. People would show me their fabulous typed notes. And I'm just like, well, I'm going along with my fountain pen. Because I was like that back then. I was using usually a Parker Vector or a Cross, a Cross Century? I'm drawing a blank at the moment. Anyway, I switched between the two pens. And I would take notes with that, usually on the back of scrap paper from the computer lab. And so I always felt a little inadequate when I'd see these typed notes. But anyway, one of the other things I noticed right away as a freshman, just how many people were not taking notes on their computer. Yes, they had it out on their desk, but they were playing Doom. Or they're reading something, or they're playing, Minesweeper, and there was some kind of a card game that used to be on computers. Basically a lot of things other than paying attention or taking notes. So that's where I'm headed with this. I want to look into that. And I want to know, those people that were legitimately paying attention, were they getting good notes? And of course now, wireless internet is ubiquitous. How are students doing on their wireless internet with all the distractions of the internet? You can text. As I was narrating to you, I got a junk email notice on my screen that made me go, and you might have even heard me pause, inviting me to a political rally that's going to happen in Fargo for a particular president I can't stand. That's a distraction. Often, if I take the laptop to class, I turn off the email and turn off those things. When I'm teaching at school, usually I have my email program not turned on, so I'm not getting those notices and I'm not distracted. But that's the obvious one, and I think I should start there. But I want to delve a little deeper into this whole topic. In general, and I've brought this up on this channel before, so no surprise here, several studies do show that students learn more with handwritten notes. So let's delve deeper. Let's look at why and what the research is exactly saying. Scientific American cited some studies of law school students, actually, that were quite interesting. For example, 90% of laptop users were off task for at least 5 minutes. Now remember, this is in law school. 60% of the students were distracted for over 1/2 of the class. Now, anecdotally, I believe it. As I record this, I just got back yesterday from a class that I took for a week in Fargo with a bunch of other teachers, and I saw exactly that kind of behavior among my classmates. Some of them were on their computers or on their phones constantly. And yeah, none of my research is even going to delve into how does the cell phone distract. But these teachers who theoretically would not accept this from their own students were constantly distracted. So yeah, I believe it. Well, so my question is, are distractions the problem with technology? Are they the only problem? And I'll just tell you this. I'm Generation X. I'm 42 years old as I record this. I'm part of that generation that grew up without the internet, without cell phones. Computers were appearing then. Video games were appearing. But they weren't portable, take-with-you type things. When I was in school, we had no trouble distracting ourselves. Your grandparents, your great-grandparents had no trouble distracting themselves from their lessons. Generations of students have been masters of self-distraction. I certainly was in my day. A window sometimes is all it takes. Watching the clock. An attractive classmate. Your own thoughts. So, yes, the computer is a more obvious distraction. Yes, the computer is less internal. Yes, the computer is more measurable. Although I was reading, although I don't have the citation here, about some experiments in China about measuring how distracted students are. I'll have to research that and try to remember to come back to that. But what else could it be? Well, also from the same Scientific American article, there are actually studies on that. One of the big names you'll hear is Mueller, and not the guy investigating various issues with our last election. This is actually not a guy either, it's a woman. Mueller did a study using laptops for taking notes, and those laptops were actually disconnected from the internet and somehow limited other distractions. And what that study found really illuminates how the mind processes information. So students were taught their content, and then they were tested in 3 areas. One of them was the memory of the factual detail. Another one was conceptual understanding of the material. And finally, the ability to synthesize and generalize information. In other words, their ability to apply it. And what they found was that basically you can type faster than you can write. That means when you're typing, you're doing very shallow processing. That means maybe you're not processing, you're just transcribing the lecture verbatim. When you're handwriting, and raise your hand if you've experienced this, you can't keep up with the lecture if you try to transcribe it. So you start realizing, I need to pick out the things that are the most important and write those down. Not all this other junk and this filler. I need to, like you would have, right there, you would have said, write down what's most important. So you need to process it more. It's more active. And of course, when you're writing, you're also engaging the motor part of your brain. So you have the shapes of letters and the location on the page to help engage you. With your screen, the page is virtual. It's pretty arbitrary. Heck, I have some software where the way it appears typed is nothing like the way it'll appear when it comes out on paper. Let's be honest here. What you're doing when you write is a lot of intellectual heavy lifting. Well, now that means your brain is more engaged. And what that does is it improves your comprehension and retention. And they found even if they warned laptop users about the distractions and about all of this, it didn't make any difference because you can record more words and it doesn't mean anything. You ever have a teacher that grades your notes and they grade them by how many pages of notes you took in a chapter? That teacher is teaching a bad habit. They're teaching you that, hey, every single word is important. Well, no. You need to start right away censoring it. That's not a good word for this. You need to start right away analyzing it and parsing it and summarizing it and dealing with it. Pruning it, there's a better word. Down to the essentials, because then you'll remember it because your brain is engaged. You may tell yourself that, I can do that later. You won't. No, just be real here. You won't. So, I could stop there. I'll tell you one of the things I do. I like to use multiple colors in my notes because that helps me picture things. Usually black with my daily writer pen is my note-taking color. If you were to look at the page where my outline is for this, which came through several iterations of typed notes, by the way, I have black ink, mostly written with a pen that I purchased at the fountain pen store in Fargo. And then I have some ink that's quizzy menthol green. Most of it is black. But intentional use of colors to make things stand out. Sometimes I'll switch a color just because I'm getting bored, and I'll start taking my notes in. While I was in Fargo this week, there was one day I took all my notes in KWZ turquoise, Quizzy iron gall turquoise. Sorry, I have to point that out. But the whole reason was it just brought my interest back. I'm using my Lamy Dialogue 3. It has an oblique medium nib. I've got the Quizzy ink going on. It just kind of brought a new interest to it. I suppose I could change font and so on, but again, I'm not engaging those motor skills. Now, I think I could say that Mueller's study has proven my case there. And yeah, there are other studies. I wasn't really able to find studies showing the opposite, that typing is better, except in a few very narrow specific cases, which weren't really what I was after. But I have more. So let's talk about a couple of other factors. In fact, let me talk just briefly, give you a little outline of how I do these driving videos that are actually researched and have bibliographies like this. And my system evolved over time. It didn't start this way. But what I have done lately is I will take notes on a whole variety of articles and write them on index cards. And then I label each index card with usually the author's name and enough of the title. And then what I do is I use Evernote to collect a copy of the article, in case I need to refer back to it. And I keep a running bibliography in a little piece on Evernote that's called show notes. In fact, I do one of these for every video, even fountain pen reviews. And that's where the numbers are and so on. The numbers don't appear until later when I rearrange them. But anyway, so it's copied out on the index cards. And then I look through my index cards and say, okay, what's a coherent story? And I arrange the index cards in a way that makes sense. Sometimes I have to jump back and forth between two index cards, or one has to come back later. I try to not put too many discrete ideas on a single index card. If, for example, May is the index card I use the most. So that was the Scientific American article. Sometimes you break those up into several index cards, but it's always the same source. Anyway, then after I've got that all figured out and organized, then I write out an outline in a notebook that guides what I want to say, and I write in, this is where I want to use this source. So when you see those little footnotes appear at the bottom of the screen where the date and the time are, that's where they're coming from. So I know, this is the source I'm using right now. Sometimes I think up something on the fly and then have to go back and add the source in later, but it is what it is. So I'm doing a double layer of processing the information. But let me ask you this. What if instead I copy the pertinent parts of each article out? I could even put the source on them and everything. Paste them into a word processing document. And then I write my outline from that. Well, there's a study about something very similar. So this was actually a study of typing notes versus copy and pasting notes. And that was an interesting notion. But then I started thinking about some of my colleagues who hand out what they call skeleton notes. And those are notes with most of it filled in with just blanks every so often. The student has to fill in. Which I hate that. I will never do that. But anyway, I thought it was interesting because this study actually further illustrated the importance of processing information as part of remembering it. Katayama tested the students with a fact-based test and with an application test. Fact-based, apparently right away there wasn't much difference. application tests, right away it showed a big advantage to typing your notes versus copy pasting them. And it also showed much better retention of the knowledge after a week delay. Which you're saying, well, that's just common sense. And you're right. But is it common sense? I mean, I like data. Common sense is a meaningless term. So that's why I like to see a study. We may say that this is common sense, but until it's actually been shown with data, how do you really know? So that's why I saw a lot of value in that. But it brought up the processing, because even the typing, you're reading articles and you're picking out, okay, this is important, this isn't. It is another way of doing my index cards that I use to format these driving videos. Now, Katayama did not compare that to handwritten index cards like I do. I would be interested in that study. I feel like you would get more using index cards. I don't know. Now, based on Mueller's study, is why I feel like that. But even so, there's that processing thing going on. And that's a big piece of memory. So let me tell you a little something about students' names. When I'm new at a school as a new teacher, and it's been a long time since I've been new at a school, one of my big battles is learning all the kids' names. Because there's a lot of names to learn, plus you have to learn your colleagues, plus you're learning a new town, and just, it goes on and on and on and on. Well, I had to learn some tricks for learning students' names. Sometimes I'll make up like a story, or I'll associate something about their appearance with their name. But what really cements a name in my memory is if I can interact with that student and say, oh, Billy, here is your paper. It's that simple. I hand back a paper to him and say, Billy, as I hand Billy's test back. Susie, Juan, Pedro, hand back their tests and saying their names. Now I've engaged several parts of my brain, and that's why I can remember that stuff. Simple. If you can have a conversation with a student, all those are things that will cement names. Now you get those students who are really quiet, never say anything. It's really hard to learn their names. And what are the names you learn first as a teacher? It's the kids that cause trouble because you interact with them. What are the kids you're most likely to remember? Hate to say it, but troublemakers. It's just the way, and it's because you are interacting. Just like when you handwrite notes in a class or reading, you are interacting with them. And, of course, engaging several parts of your brain, which I'm coming to that research here in a minute. So one of the things I've heard, my students say it sometimes, Mr. Squirrel, you're old. They don't call me Mr. Squirrel, but we'll go with that for the video. They'll call me Mr. my last name. But anyway, you're old. You just don't understand the modern generation. Well, okay, I guess I look old when you're 16, because I'm more than twice their age. But honestly, I'm only 42, so not old yet. By the way, we are coming up on Dickinson, North Dakota. Still on Highway 22. We'll take 22 all the way through Dickinson and get off on Interstate 94. That looked like the beginning of Oh, yeah, it is. I need to pause it and put the word Dickinson as a little subtitle. I am trying to make it more friendly to those who are wondering where the heck I am. So, that's Dickinson. Now, back to this. So, anyway, they'll say I'm old and I just don't understand. I have students telling me they can multitask. I just don't understand because I'm old. Well, no, they can't. That would be a good topic for another video, but just research the brain and multitasking. The brain does not multitask. It gets worse at doing everything. Oh, you can tell I'm recording this upstairs because you can hear the road noise. Yay. Anyway, you'll hear this generation referred to as digital natives. Well, I'm not a digital native. I told you, I grew up without cell phones and all that. My family had a rotary dial phone. We We had a computer, but it was TI-99 4A. And I told you, the one school I went to up through 8th grade had a lab full of TRS-80s. Look that up if you're curious. And then my high school had Apple IIe's. Internet wasn't even a consideration for me as a kid. So you could say there's an argument for that. These are students who never knew a world where they didn't have easy, quick access to information or the internet or each other. And when I was a kid, you want to talk to your friends on the phone, you're using the family phone and you're hogging a line. The well-off kids would get their own phone in their bedroom so they weren't hogging the family line. If they got in trouble, the phone got taken out of their room. Nowadays, every kid gets their own cell phone. Lucky kids, when I was young, would get their own TV in their room. Nowadays, you're carrying a portable entertainment device. And if you're older than me, you remember when it was just the family TV. And I wasn't one of the rich families. I was the family that had the family TV, the family radio, the family telephone. So I know that world. But anyway, I want to talk about a study that was done with children. Now, children are very good at understanding electronic devices. They don't have all the preconceived notions using a device that we do. My mother, when she uses the computer, and yes, they have an iMac now, my parents do, for a long time had all the instructions for how to turn it on and log in written out right beside it so she wouldn't mess it up. And she was always afraid, what if it blows up or something if you do something wrong? I grew up without any of those fears because I was used to computers from a young age. We had that TI-99 4A, and there was an Apple IIe in elementary school that we'd wheel from classroom to classroom. So, I get that kids are more used to them. Now, what's kind of wild here is that I'm going to talk now about a study that was done with children. So these children were engaged in writing, both with a pen and with typing, keyboard. What the study found is that children write better with a pen because they'll write longer pieces, they will write faster, and they will write more complete sentences. Now, the keyboard did rate a little bit higher for things like writing the alphabet. Okay. So, remember, these are children who don't have any preconceived notions. They haven't had a chance. They're not old enough to be used to one or the other. They're struggling to learn to write. They're struggling to learn to use a keyboard. I was at the rodeo last night, which I really didn't want to be there because I just gotten back from this trip right here that you're watching all the way to Fargo. But I had to take pictures for the rodeo, which I'm skipping today. Don't tell the editor. But anyway, this little girl was beside me, and her dad handed her his cell phone because she was getting bored, so she started taking pictures. I'm pretty sure she wasn't old enough to know how to read yet, but she had no trouble using the cell phone to take pictures. Then she started asking me about my camera, which is a totally different deal from a cell phone. And so I was trying to explain I'm taking pictures for the newspaper. Well, she didn't know what a newspaper was. And yeah, like I said, very young kid. But see, you're getting these children now who don't have a bias toward any particular device. Yes, they can pick up the electronics easily, but the written word is a different deal. Keyboards don't come naturally to kids. If you can remember when you learned to type properly, if you ever did, it didn't come naturally. Same with handwriting. It'll be interesting to see what happens if spoken and speaking into a computer becomes a thing, but I couldn't find research about that either. Well, anyway, what researchers have found is that writing actually stimulates a part of the brain called the RAS. You may have even seen me wear a maroon-colored t-shirt in my videos I record in the summer with the word RAS on it. And it comes from an in-service I took. We all were given a t-shirt. We had two choices, one that said RAS and the other one said grow those dendrites. Well, the RAS is a part of the brain. It's called the reticular activating system. And what it does is filters what the brain needs to process. I am told that if you can convince the RAS that you're skinny, it'll make it easier to lose weight. If you convince your RAS that you're fat, it'll be a lot harder to lose weight. I'm sort of in the middle, so I need to talk my brain into thinking I'm skinny so I can go that direction rather than continue on the path I went on last fall when it was so miserable and hot. Well, anyway, back on topic. Sorry about that. I keep getting off topic. Writing actually engages a lot more parts of the brain. It makes the RAS a lot more active because motor skills, pattern recognition, visual, it's a whole bunch of different parts of the brain, whereas typing a letter on a keyboard doesn't activate nearly as many parts of the brain. If you're using more parts of the brain, you're more likely to remember it. Now, if you are into educational research at all, you probably know that you should engage students with a topic in more than one way, because then they're more likely to remember it. Explaining it, showing them, involving them, having them do something, maybe a picture, maybe a story. There are a lot of things you need to do. You can't just write notes on the board and assume they're learning it. Well, that's what writing is doing, is it's inputting things in a variety of ways into the brain. And that's why writing is considered, and I'm sorry I don't have this reference ready either because I'm off topic, but that's why writing is considered one of the silver bullets of good education. Get those kids writing. So toward the end of Mueller's study, she actually brought up that we may be seeing a transition back to writing in this era of live scribe and stylus. So, true story, I am on the tech committee of my school. I don't know how somebody like me ended up on it, but I did. I was part of that group that decided how we're going to go one-to-one and all the issues and so on, and picked out computers. So one of the things I really pushed for were devices where you could handwrite. Ideally, it would be something with like a Wacom stylus. If you're into like a Wacom graphics tablet, they're pretty awesome. And I wanted that handwriting available. That's why we ended up with these Becks and the Microsoft Surface. They may be limited in other ways, true, but they allow the handwriting. I know in my own classroom, I'm really going to be pushing OneNote because it allows handwriting input and taking notes by hand. And OneNote kind of gives you a good world too, because not only can you handwrite, but it often can turn it into typed after you handwriting it. So, winner. So that was a big thing for me. Plus, the way I give notes, they're not always lending themselves well to the typed format because I'm sort of loosey-goosey. Here's a drawing. Oh, let's do this whole thing as a sketch of different things pointing at each other instead of a linear outline. And so I'm curious how these screens will play into this topic. Well, isn't it convenient that there was a 1998 study on exactly that? The device was called Dynamite. I couldn't find as much information as I wanted to, and sadly the study is hidden behind a paywall. I could read the abstract, and that was about it. But essentially it was a paper-like interface where you could write on the screen or draw. You could index your information with keywords and organize it into sub-notebooks, usually by keyword. What they found with the study is it was pretty good for memory. I don't think at the time there were a lot of studies about handwriting versus typed. But one thing they did find is that it was better than paper for finding information. So yeah, true story. If you look at this notebook that I'm reading this out of right now, This page, I have handwritten versus typed notes. The page before, that's from my last driving video, paper versus analog. Then I have my Midori Traveler's Notebook notes. I have notes for a video that's upcoming on teaching as a career. I have one about just driving videos in general. Actually, two, because I accidentally skipped a page. One was kind of a rough draft, one went further. Oh, there's one all on just ideas for videos. One, kind of some preliminary thoughts, and doing one on debate on social media. One on upcoming pens. Sorry, I had to take a break there and clear my throat, so I figured you didn't want to listen to that. One on the 10 Commandments. I mean, there is no rhyme or reason to this. So the nice thing, one of the strengths of the virtual format is you can rearrange it. Now, I know, I hear you. You're saying, yeah, I have this magical thing called a binder, where when I want to rearrange pages, I just open that puppy up, lift this page out, put her over here, and we're done. You're right. As you collect lots of binders, it gets harder to find things. You have to search for them. Maybe it's in this binder over here. They take up a lot of space. Now, I love paper. But, wow, does this look like all cattywampus and sideways to you? Well, no, the horizon looks... I don't know. Is it the road? No, it must be the road. Anyway, sorry, that was a distraction. But anyway, it's organizing information in an electronic format is a lot easier than it is with the paper format. There's a reason I keep my addresses and phone numbers and stuff, all this contact information, on my computer. It's easy to find. I can access this list even from my work computer if I need to. I prefer not to, because I try and keep those parts of my life separate, but I have all my contacts in one program, which happens to be an Apple program, so yeah, there we go. It's wonderful for that. When I add a new address, I'm okay. If you were to look at my parents' address book, they're a little older than me, until they finally went computer. They tried typing it with the typewriter. They tried hand, then they would add new addresses. They'd scribble out addresses as friends died or moved or whatever. It was just a horrific mess. Now it's all on computer, so even they have bowed to the power of technology. There are things that computers are good at, so I don't want you to think as you listen to this video and some of the upcoming ones that I'm some kind of a Luddite. I'm not. I love technology. But we can't forget the power of what one of my commenters called the analog either. When you write, you are engaging big parts of your brain. That helps your memory, helps your creativity. In fact, I'd suggest looking at some of the links that don't appear in this video, because there's several other links in the bibliography about writing, about coming up with ideas and so on. Very, very interesting stuff. So what I'm going to close with is a little bit of me, personal, about my creative / writing / researchy world. No links or anything, but I'm already tacking on more footage to this video that I thought was going to stop right there. Something about me you probably already guessed is that I can type very fast. I was always, when I took typing in high school, I took it as a freshman in high school, which seems too late. At first I balked at having to learn how to touch type properly, but once I accepted that, I picked it up very quickly and became one of the faster people in the classroom. I am a fast typer. Now, what I have found with writing, I've learned, and I need to do a different video about this because this is more a typing versus handwritten thing. I need to outline and plan a lot first. That's very important. So let's set that aside. Now let's get down to the actual brass tacks of writing the book. I need to handwrite that thing. Yeah, I know what's going to happen in the story. I know what's going to happen when. I know what's going to happen where. I know who the characters are. I've got all that planned out. But the actual creative act of writing has to be done by hand. That's just how my brain works. I can't be creative on a computer. Now, when it comes to second and third drafts, I'm kind of in trouble. Especially a second draft is so much rewriting, and that's, I hate to admit it, but I'm stalled somewhere between second and fourth draft. If you saw my writing method, you'd understand that. Getting from those words onto the computer. Because your second draft, you're probably doing a lot of changes. I'm doing major changes because in some ways I became a new person since I started this project, this novel. And it made some very, very fundamental changes to the story. And I've really struggled with the typing part. So I finally went back to handwriting a draft. I've been much more successful with that. Well, then I need to go back. At some point it has to be typed. And it is really easy for my brain to look at those handwritten pages and type them. And so I've had a brainwave. And I think the next time I start a new novel, I'm going to start this way. Why not? So handwrite till your hand write it out, and then type it into the computer right away. Yes, it may go in a little bit too verbatim. Oh well. At least it's typed, and it's a small chunk, because I absolutely hate sitting there typing. It's a small chunk typed into the computer. You can do a small chunk. And then it's on the computer. I can edit it. I still got the advantages of handwriting. I already would have made some corrections as I typed. And then it's all virtual. So that's where I'm stalled right now. Now that classes are over and this Fargo thing is over, I think I've got time to actually work on that. And hopefully get something accomplished by fall with it, because I've got several ideas welling up in my brain that are just screaming to get out. So I've got to get this one done. And then we'll see. Now, I'm on Interstate 94 here. Just quick side note for you. When I do these driving videos, there's rarely anything typed, except, of course, the list of references you see down below. When I'm teaching, I don't often handwrite labs or, materials that I hand out. The part that usually gets handwritten is my outline. Or I made rough drafts, a little piece of it by hand, and then go ahead and type the full thing. Not sure why that is. I suppose it's a different kind of writing, or maybe I'm trying to save time. I mean, honestly, to do the kind of job I'd like to do, I would need to teach a smaller variety of classes. I can't imagine teaching all one class all day, but 4 different preps is still quite a lot to a lot of people in this country. Much nicer than the 6 different preps I had when I started teaching, but that's another story. But the moral of the story is, I'm still using the handwriting because that's where all my planning happens, is on paper. I might diagram out a class or draw an outline for it, or I said draw an outline, I meant draw an outline, not write an outline. Somehow that mix of handwritten and typed. When I take a class, my preference is to handwrite in a notebook. Now, I'm a little sad. The class I took this past week was very handout centered, and we did a lot more using just the handout, underlining sentences and highlighting items, and then occasionally writing in the margin. And I know I will remember less because of that. If I could handwrite, if I could write my own notes, I'd remember a lot more. And what I should do, especially while it's still fresh in my memory, is go back and do those handwritten notes. Kind of like I do with a driving video. Organize them. And we'll just have to see where that takes me. So I think about all these things. Like I said, I'm not a Luddite. Technology is important. Technology brings a lot of potential. I am actually excited about my school going 1-to-1. Yet let's not forget how the brain works. So I thank you for watching. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.